Welcome to the Mike and Alison After Hours podcast with your hosts, mshelah and Alison Haas, talking business with real business owners in the Mid-Atlantic region. Today's episode is sponsored by Advantage Industries. When you need business technology, get Advantage Industries to protect and promote your business. To learn more, go to www.getadvantage.com and schedule your first meeting to see if you qualify for a free network scan.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mike and Alison After Hours. I am your host, mshelah, and this is normally the part where I would introduce my always wonderful and often whimsical co-host, Alison Haas. Alison could not be here with us today, so we are sending all of our love and support not only to Alison, but the entire Haas family. So with that, we have a fantastic guest for you. Our theme for the last 30 plus episodes has always been centered around business owners and business leaders in the Mid-Atlantic marketplace. And today we are getting back to our roots. So we've had a couple of really great diversions from our normal path. We had a sales expert on, we had a marketing expert on, we had a government contracting expert on, and we're going to do that in 2022 as well. But today we have a fourth generation business owner with a company that has been around for 100 years. And I cannot wait to dive into this. Ben Yingling, the president of Crawford and Yingling Insurance. But before we do that, you may remember we did have a sales expert on a few months ago, Matt McDarby. He published a book called The Divine Comedy of Sales. And Matt is giving away a copy of his book for our audience. And I'm proud to say that Gary Martin with Graphic Artists Guild, you are the winner. So yay! Congratulations, Gary. We will be reaching out to you in the coming days, and we'll connect you with Matt, and Matt can personalize the book and he will ship it right to you. Now you may be wondering, well, hey, Mike, I want to win fun stuff too. So how do I do that? Well, I'm glad you asked, viewing and listening audience, because all you have to do is watch or listen to the show, subscribe, drop a comment, give us a like, share it on one of your social media platforms and tag myself or Alison or the guest so that we know. And you're entered into the contest. So we will have a fantastic new contest for you in January of 2022. And we do have one more episode coming up after our conversation with Ben today, where Alison and I are going to take you through some of the fun guests that we've had in 2021, a retrospective, if you will, to help you catch up, the Cliff Notes version of Mike and Alison After Hours. So I have blabbed enough. I want to introduce my good friend, business owner, president of Crawford and Yingling Insurance, a man who, to say he is involved in the community is an understatement. When you look at Ben's list of volunteer, of service in the Westminster community. So I have lived here for 16 years. Ben has arguably lived here his entire life, born here, raised here, went to college here, and has been in his family's business a very, very long time. And he was just telling me that it is now officially his. So we're going to get into all of that. Ben Yingling, welcome to Mike and Alison After Hours. So excited to see you, brother.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. So Ben, we're going to start with who, what, where, when, why, how. And this is your opportunity to tell the audience a little bit about who you are, who Crawford Yingling Insurance is, who are your customers, the marketplace that you serve. And I certainly want to hear about the fact that this is a fourth generation family owned company celebrating over 100 years of service, because you just don't hear that a whole lot anymore. So please, you may begin where you'd like to begin. Who, what, where, when, why now?
Well, sure. So I'm Ben Yingling. I was born and raised in Westminster, Maryland. I attended Loyola Blakefield High School, a Jesuit private school in Baltimore, McDaniel College, played lacrosse, and then was working at Paradiso, local, restaurant establishment here, figuring out what I wanted to do after college. And one of my contacts in Paradiso, somebody who I'd gotten to know by working there, as you know, you'll probably touch on all the time, is so important, build your network, said, "Hey, what are you doing, Ben, after college?" I said, "Geez, I don't know. I'm interviewing here. I'm interviewing there." And he says, "Why don't you come interview at my financial services company in Hunt Valley?" And I said, "Sure, that sounds good." And there it goes. You know, I spent 4 years down there and really fell in love with the business and decided to come back to my family's established business here in Westminster. I believe that was in July 2011. So I've been here for 10 years at Crawford Yingling Insurance. So it's been a great ride.
Yeah, I find that fascinating because you didn't start in the family business. You weren't groomed per se, because that happens very often. You went through your own paces, you went through your own self-discovery, and like most of us, got a job in the restaurant business because that teaches you work, hustle, and ethic. I sometimes miss my days in the restaurant business. I absolutely do. There's a certain mentality that comes along with it, which really leads to being in sales, which really leads to working off of commissions, and really leads to understanding what fantastic customer service looks like, which I know are all things that wrap into Crawford Yingling Insurance. So tell us a little bit about who your customers are and the marketplace that you serve.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are an independent insurance agency. So we represent, 10 different carriers. We're not beholden to one insurance company. So I think it's important to start with what our mission statement is. And, to small businesses out there, if you don't have your mission statement, you should develop one, because everything that you do comes back to it. So ours is guiding and protecting all generations. And I think it's important, to establish all generations, because we are 102 years old. My great grandfather started the business when he came back from World War I in 1919. So we've protected the past. We're protecting the present, but we need to invest in the experience to protect the future generations. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, more on this podcast. So who is that? Well, we're divided into two business segments. We insure small businesses, which, is a relative term. I mean,
It sure is.
SBA defines what small business is, like 500 million in revenue and under or something. It's great,
Yeah.
where we define our best customers is your small businesses that we are doing probably closer to 10 million in revenue and under. I'll go up to a 15 million, but 10 million in revenue and under. So think about your working right now with a technology staffing company that does about 8 million in revenue. They have some unique exposures. Think your specialized contractor that's got like 10 to 15 trucks and 15 employees. Like, those are really like our small business clients that we like to deal with. Love to deal with those scale up companies. Those companies that are really growing at a rapid pace, whereas, insurance is not really on their radar, but it needs to be handled by somebody who understands and wants to grow with them. So that's the first part. And then the second part is personal lines. So home, auto, and umbrella. And we really have to deliver an exceptional client experience in this area, because it is a crowded marketplace. Who turns on the television or is online on watching a YouTube video or goes to a sporting event? I mean, you are seeing Geico, Nationwide, State Farm everywhere. You're flooded with this narrative of, hey, save 15%. So we really have to deliver something different. We define our market in personal lines as we love the young. We love the professional. Okay. So that 30 to 50-year-old person, don't make me wrong, we've got, plenty of people over 50, and we love those customers.
And people under 30. Yeah.
People under 30. We do have people under 30, but your 30-year-old to 50-year-old who is a professional, who is a sales professional like Mike, a business owner, an accountant, a lawyer, a government, employee, usually looking for those couples that are married, might have children, they have assets, they understand that personal insurance is not a commodity, and they're looking for somebody to guide them to make sure they're protected in an event something catastrophic happens and they don't want to be selling off assets. They want to make sure that everything that they are working for and they're going to continue to work for is protected. So that's really our market on the personal line side.
Yeah, and I love what you said there, because our audience is made up largely of business owners, business executives that are trying to learn from peers, like you, somebody that owns a business, somebody that runs a business. Because what we've learned is, particularly if you start a business from the ground up, and your great grandfather would probably be able to speak to this, is that you're a salesperson first and foremost when you start your own company, whether you like it or not. That's part and parcel with owning your own business, and you really have to separate yourself. You and I were talking before we started recording that my company has been transformative, particularly in the last 12 months, because we got very clear on who we are, what we do, and why that's better than 98% of the other companies that look just like us from the outside crust. And that's the challenge that the consumer, that the customer faces, is, well, why would I want to work with Ben? Why would I want to work with Mike? There's 1,000 insurance company brokers out there. There's 1,000 IT and cybersecurity companies out there. And I don't know how to make that decision. So I stick my hand in a hat and I pull out 3 names, and maybe I do a little due diligence and I pull one out. So I love that you crystallized that, because sure, you can and name an insurance provider. There's 1,000 of them. You can pick one, and without deeper inspection, they're all going to basically kind of do the same job. The difference is your representative and their ability to listen to the customer and say, why is that important to you? I'm not saying it's not, but I want to understand why it's important to you, because the last person I spoke to, it wasn't important to, and that changes how you support that person. So that's a brilliant little nugget. That's an aha moment. So I love that, and thank you. Now, I'm going to segue a little bit to something that I am deeply passionate about, that I'm sure you've seen more of, particularly in 2021, and that's on the commercial side of the business, and specifically cybersecurity insurance. And I don't want to get deep in the weeds unless you're feeling randy and want to follow me, but
it's a fun topic.
I've heard a couple of interesting observations. So COVID forced people to embrace technology way more than they were before. Now, 25% of the marketplace was ready and transitioned nicely. Roughly 60% of the marketplace struggled, and then the remainder was clueless. And with that was their level of protection in cybersecurity insurance. And I've spoken with a number of experts, particularly in the last few months, that have pointed out that the insurance industry, which, by the way, doesn't lose money, they're in the business to make money, paid more in cyber claims in the last year than they had in like the previous 5 combined, a staggering number. So as a result, they are now being much more discriminating. If you want a policy, okay, first, it's going to cost more. And second, you need to answer these 35 questions so that we know you're doing things properly, and somebody in your company is going to attest that you're doing these things, because if we find out you're not, then your claim's going to be denied. So, and I don't think a lot of people really understand and get that. So I'd love to hear your conversation piece on that, because I tell people all the time, you need my services and you need people like Ben. You need Crawford Yingling Insurance, particularly when we're talking about cybersecurity insurance. So would love to hear your thoughts.
Yes, so you're absolutely right about that. Now the statistic they paid more in a year, I don't know that. That doesn't surprise me. I mean, that does not surprise me at all, and it's staggering. And and I think that as that exposure, when you talk about cyber, it's an exposure, that it evolves every single day. So to your point about like them essentially they're tightening up on underwriting, because what typically happens with an insurance carrier is they look at a segment of business and they say, ooh, we could make money in this business. And they do research and they say, okay, well, our models show that if we charge this,
risk analysis,
this, we can make money, But cyber has just changed so much, that exposure, that they have definitely taken losses. So I think that what the really most important thing about cyber exposure, and take insurance out of it, is cyber, as you know in your industry, is a true enterprise risk management function. 95% of protecting yourself against cyber is your people. Like, you're educating your people. Like, don't click on emails that don't come, use multi-factor, authorization, and those type of things, which, you're obviously more the expert than me on that component of the risk management. The insurance part of it is essentially your last resort, your stopgap. They got through all of the people, they got through everything, and then you have the cyber insurance. But yeah, to your point, I mean, the market is tightening. So if you're a small business owner, you're a technology business. I don't care if you're a bakery or you're an insurance agency or you're a technology business. You need to have it, and I would get it sooner than later, because I do not know where it's going to go. Whether it's going to be prohibitively expensive.
And that's an honest statement. That's a genuine statement.
Yeah. Insurance companies do a couple things if they get into a business segment where they can't make money. One, they get out of it. Two, they make it prohibitively expensive. Or three, they make it very difficult for you to get it, and it's expensive.
Yeah.
So, if you're a business owner, get it, and get it now. Whether it's from me or my buddy Ben at North Central or whoever, talk to your independent agent, talk to your broker about it.
Yeah, and so that's a good point too, because I last night at 7:00, I was on the phone with a new prospective client, and that story was very interesting because I was doing my LinkedIn thing, which you know very well, Ben. You were one of my disciples, and I was reaching out to a targeted audience, and the owner of this company just was not getting back to me. She was flat out ignoring me, which, as a salesperson, that happens.
Absolutely.
And so I employed one of my strategies where I reached out to the people that I have as mutual connections, and I happened to get lucky and find one that knew her exceptionally well. And he thinks very highly of me. So he made an email introduction to her on my behalf. And she immediately introduced me to the CFO of her company. I have a meeting with the CFO, and we spent an hour on the phone with him, that first call, just talking about cybersecurity. And he says to me, I talk to companies like you all the time. And what I'm learning is my current company really isn't being proactive. They're not recommending the things that I should be doing. I'm the one asking them, hey, what is this? Do I need it? And much like insurance, there's no one insurance. So you can, on a personal matter, you can insure a person's home, their automobile, their recreational vehicles. And that's a very short piece of a very long list of ways that you can work with your clients, because everybody has basic needs. Like you can't own a home and not have insurance. You can't own a car and not have insurance. So those things tend to get looked at as necessary evils. But that doesn't mean that your provider can't be proactive. And I think that's what you're getting at, is when your relationship with your insurance agent is a strong one, that they're being proactive and they're asking, so kids are going off to college. Well, how does that change your insurance needs? You just bought a retirement home. How does that change your insurance needs? You just bought a truck for hauling the Winnebago on weekends. How does that change your insurance needs? Because insurance is not insurance. You use the word umbrella. And I think a lot of people hear that and they don't necessarily think about what that means. But from my perspective, the notion of an umbrella is that it encompasses a lot and it keeps the rain off of you so you don't get soaked.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So I love everything that you brought up there today, Ben. Now, I want to spend a few minutes talking about leadership because as I've mentioned a couple times already, you're the fourth generation. You're with the company now 10 years. You officially took over as president last year. You said you bought the company from your father, who I'm sure is still around, but probably mostly playing golf and enjoying himself. But likes to remind you that he's your father from time to time. But this is now your company. It's your entity.
He's in the office more now that I don't pay him than he was before when I was paying him. It's an anomaly.
So let's talk a little bit about leadership, because that's something that I have seen you demonstrate. I could read off your list of accolades, but you've been chairman of the board for the Carroll County Chamber. You've been on legislative committees. You're active in the city council for the city of Westminster, where we both live. So those all, in several ways, help prepare you to lead your company. So give me your initial thoughts on leadership, because I'm very keen to hear those.
I would consider myself to be a mediocre leader. And I'm very humble about that. I need to be a better leader. And I think that's an attribute of leadership, is you're always wanting to improve upon yourself and the others around you. Your willingness to, I think one of my greatest strengths, my greatest strength is to build relationships. That's my greatest strength, is to go and build relationships over time with people. But another strength is I'm willing to, and I saw this in the city government when I was on the city council, is you need to know when you're not the expert in the room, and listen and surround yourself with really smart people. I think one of the things that Steve Jobs talked about a lot in articles is he surrounded himself with people who were really, really smart. And he was really, really smart.
Yeah.
He was the innovator.
No small task.
He wasn't really the executor. He was the visionary. And so he surrounded himself with smart people. I'm a big proponent of that. Surround yourself with really smart people and be a sponge. In my first career in financial services, one of my mentors said, be a sponge in this place and soak up everything you possibly can. Use other people's intellectual capital. I'm a big, big fan of reaching out to other people who are more successful than I am and saying, why are you successful? What are you doing? And that's kind of, my take on leadership. Learn from others, and I'm getting better at that. And I appreciate your praise, but there's a lot of leaders out there that are way better than me, and I reach out to those people. I'll tell you a good example of that is Ross Albers. If y'all don't know Ross Albers from Albers and Associates, that guy, he's a leader. And ever since I've struck a friendship with him, which, by the way, he reached out to me on LinkedIn 5-6 years ago, he has inspired me. He has raised my level of leadership ability and raise the level of my company just by being around him. So there's another thing: surround yourself with like-minded, successful people. People who bring you down or people who are critical. I mean, look, I get it. You don't want to cut off your best friend from, middle school, but keep them at arm's length. Surround yourself with successful people who are like-minded, who want to bring you up, not bring you down. So that's kind of like my view on leadership.
Well, I love what you said, because excellent leadership is not a goal. It is a journey. And I was given a couple of leadership opportunities very early in my career. Like, I was 25, 26 years old, didn't know my head from a hole in the wall. And I failed miserably at them because the dynamic was, I was a really good salesperson. I was always one of the top performers at the company I worked at. And they figured, well, he can teach others. And I was really not good at that. I hadn't figured that out yet. I hadn't developed the ability to mentor others and to really listen to others. So the fact that you stated that, hey, I'm kind of mediocre, I'm really not all that great, I think that's brilliant, because you have to look at yourself and say, I can always be better. And I think that's the mark of a great owner or a great executive, is when they can internalize and say, I need to be better. And, my relationship with my direct manager is much like that. He and I have known each other for over 20 years, and we have some pretty passionate conversations at times. And we've the next day had to say, hey, look, I was out of line, and I was trying to do the right thing and I didn't. And what you want those conversations to become less frequent.
Sure.
But it's equally important that you have them when they're necessary. When you can look back at a conversation and say, you know what, I didn't handle that right. And the notion of surrounding yourself with brilliant people. Ross hired me to do some of my LinkedIn training a few years ago, and I got to meet him and his team, and to hear him and how he approaches his profession as a lawyer, as a professional in that field, and how he develops his people. He says, we're a leadership development company that happens to be made up of a bunch of lawyers. Like that's his task. That's his mentality. And isn't that fantastic? Like, that's leadership. So I know, and I've gotten to work with you and a couple members of your staff over the years. So tell me a little bit about team building, because you're firsthand involved with that. You have been for several years in your organization. Finding the right people. What resonates with you when it comes to bringing the right people into Crawford Yingling Insurance?
Gosh, that's a great question. And
it's not an easy one to answer. I know.
No, it's not. I have a list of like 10 questions and then 10 follow-up questions that are designed to, I like independent thinkers who, can really problem solve on their own and come up with creative ways to overcome obstacles. What makes a great team member? We've got 4, including my dad. The support for one another. So we have weekly staff meetings where we start our meeting with, okay, let's share everybody's wins and let's share everybody's struggles, and how do we help you overcome those struggles? So there needs to be
Love it.
There needs to be some empathy for your team, and that we all are trying to reach that ultimate goal, whether it's a sales goal or whether, monthly, yearly, or a goal to increase retention by 2 points. That cohesive bond between people, and I'll tell you, at a small company like mine, right now, I do the interviewing, I do the hiring, and I've been very blessed that I've got some great people, including many of the interns from McDaniel College. I've had like 7 of them over the last, 5 years. it's a lot of gut feeling. I like to think that one of my really good strengths is, to be a judge of character, right off the bat a little bit. I have been wrong before.
Haven't we all?
And we all, but that plays a lot into it. There's no like methodical, way of, I've got a point system and I check it off. I'm just not there yet. So, critical thinking, empathy for others, obviously hardworking, trustworthy, the normal stuff you'd like to see in a team member is how I choose.
Well,
and
you started this off with something that in the 30 plus interviews we've done, I've never heard before. So I'm not going to ask you to spill your secret sauce, but the 10 questions, how did that start? Is that something you inherited? Is that something you just started organically building? Like, where did that come from? Because I think that's brilliant. That's a takeaway for our viewing and listening audience is, coming up with 10 questions that really help you crystallize a prospective employee. And not that. So, okay, I'm going to get on my soapbox for just a second.
Yeah, of course.
I have been interviewed enough times that I'll get 4 or 5 questions into the process and go, okay, you have absolutely zero desire to hire me. You're going through the motions. These questions have absolutely zero relevance to me actually working for you, being successful, being productive. And I think most people can empathize with that they've been in that scenario where they've talked to a hiring manager or recruiter. Now, you're the owner of the company, so there's a different flavor. But so talk a little bit about how the 10 questions came about. I think that's fascinating.
Google search over like 7 years, I seriously, I mean, it's no big secret, but it
resonated with you. You saw that.
It did.
That's smart.
So basically you Google search good interview questions and, there's hundreds of them, and so you go and I picked out a bunch of different questions, and for me to kind of explain why they resonate with me, I'm really not good at that, but it pulls out what their critical thinking ability is, pulls out how do they want to be a team player, and one of the ones I asked, I think came from like Amazon, where it's like, if you were one wild animal, what would you be and why? So I think like, somebody said once, like they were a fox, because they can be quick and sly, or somebody says like a lion because, they're driven to XYZ. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, it was a Google search that I just kind of have done over time. Like for example, I'm looking at my questions right now, describe your ideal work environment. Okay. That tells you a lot. Hey, I want structure. I want 9 to 5. I want, all this paid vacation time. Well, maybe that's not really the perfect salesperson, but it might be good for a back office person. So it just helps me kind of pull out who they really are. So yeah, Google search and then pick them out. It's been about 5 years or so I've been using it.
Google search goes along with that notion of surround yourself with smarter people that are much smarter than you. And I was on a client call yesterday. My company, we do IT, we do cybersecurity, we do it very well. We have certain strengths and certain focuses. Now, a opportunity came to us that was a little bit out of our normal scope. Certainly from a competency standpoint, we could have done it. We consulted with a partner of ours and we decided, you know what, we're going to have our partner run this project for the client because it's in the best interest of the client. And what'll come out of the back end of that for us is a lot more opportunity for us to do the things that we excel at, that our partner he doesn't have the time, effort, or energy to do those things. So he's surgical when it comes to cybersecurity. He's very precise. And this client had those precise needs that, we could have done, we could have figured out, but we probably would have ended up costing the customer more money and more time. So this made a lot of sense, but it's about having those trusted partners, having those people that are smarter than you. We tell, and he's worked on several clients of ours now over the last year plus. And all of our customers that have engaged with him love the results. And that's what matters. I think that's what so many business leaders miss is, yes, I want to sell you something. Of course I do. But I want to sell the right thing for the right reason. Now, I'm also the first one to admit, and Alison and I talk about this on the show all the time, there are a lot of terrible salespeople. With that, there are a lot of terrible business owners that they want the dollar. And they're very indiscriminate to how they get the dollar. I've met your father, but I never met your grandfather or your great grandfather. But I'm willing to bet that there is a sense of ethics in your family that really aligns well with insurance. And I'm guessing that has helped with leadership for you as well.
Yeah, my father is the greatest person on this earth. Much better person than I am. And I say that jokingly, but he is a man of ethics. His father was. I didn't know my great grandfather. I would have loved to, but I believe that he probably was as well. But my dad is my hero. I've been so blessed that he has empowered me to take the company to the next level, because that doesn't always happen in a family business. If there's any family businesses out here, they know what I'm talking about. When the generation changes, when the next guard comes in, it can be painful. Can be painful where, the actual business transition, it can be painful on the personal side. It can spill over into, the rest of the family. I mean, I've seen that, and I didn't have any of that. My father trusted me, and it's not that he didn't challenge me, because he did, and he still does, even though he has no ownership. But he still challenges me, but ultimately recognizes that this is my company and we are moving forward and I have the final decision. And I appreciate that, because there are a lot of businesses, families out there that is not the case.
Yeah. So you just used one of my gold star words, which is trust. Anybody that knows me, anybody that has listened to the show before knows that I am a huge fan of the late, great Dr. Stephen Covey and his series of books, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And everything in those books is built around trust. You want to have a successful company? Build trust. You want to have lots of clients? Build trust. And he wrote a book called The Speed of Trust. I mean, that word is so powerful, and it resonates so well. And he talks about trust but verify, and that's what great leaders do, is trust but verify. So Ben, before we go, I have to get this last piece from you, because I know it is essential to what makes you up as well as what makes up Crawford Yingling. So for those of you that are listening and not watching, Ben is wearing a Boys and Girls Clubs knit hat. And again, Ben and I have lived in the community together for 16 years. And in that time, I've seen him deliver pies, and I've seen him deliver turkeys, and I've seen him go to jail. Not literally, but for fundraisers. And I know that serving the community, giving back, is a critical element to what makes Crawford Yingling Insurance. So, and I know you're a humble man. You don't like to talk about this stuff, but just share for a minute, how that came about. Was it as simple as it was a tradition started by your great grandfather? Is it something that has deeply resonated with you? Is it a little bit about, so just talk a little bit about Because I know that is part of the Crawford Yingling Insurance identity.
Sure. I believe it probably I'm very pretty positive. It started with my great grandfather. He was involved with the local Rotary Club, the Davis Library. Those were all, back in 1919, all the business owners were all friends, and, small community, and that's where they socialized. That's where they did business and hung out. So it just became like part of that. I think part of that culture. My grandfather, members of the Lions Club, my dad, members of Kiwanis, works with Carroll Community College, Carroll Hospital, McDaniel. So yeah, I think it really started 102 years ago. And, it's fun to be able to give back to the community because it builds like rapport, and also it's great for your team members. It's a great team building exercise. But ultimately, too, if we look at like business from, and you look at a sales role, like when you give back to your community, you're doing great things for the community, but you're also building like your brand in a setting where you have like-minded people who share a passion for the same thing. So, it does open up doors, for business relationships. That's not obviously the primary purpose, but that's an indirect benefit that happens. So yeah, get involved in your community. I love the Boys and Girls Club, by the way. Giving Tuesday is coming up in 1 week. Mr. Jack Tevis, who is the president of Tevis Energy here in town, if we reach a certain goal, he will be dunked in a dunk tank next Tuesday. So if you go online and donate $5, $10, $100, that really helps for Giving Tuesday with the Westminster Boys and Girls Club.
That is phenomenal. So as we are recording this episode just a couple of days before Thanksgiving, I will conclude our interview today, Ben, by saying thank you to you. I think thankfulness and gratitude unintentionally became two running themes in our conversation today. And I think that's exceptional, not just for this time of year, but for business leaders and business owners to take to heart when they're talking about their company and the vision for the coming years. So thank you so much, Ben, for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Mike. It was a great time. And thanks for everybody who's listening, and everybody have a wonderful, safe holiday.
Yep. And for those of you that are interested in talking to Ben more about working with him, we will have his contact information in the show notes for you. We'll have his email, we'll have his website, we'll have his phone number so that you can reach out to him. And it's not limited to Carroll County. I want to be real clear about that. Ben has a strong focus on Howard County as well and the surrounding burbs of the Carroll County area. So if you are somewhere in the Mid-Atlantic market and what Ben has said to you resonates with you, he is more than happy to discuss serving you personally, serving you professionally, and even both. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the latest episode of Mike and Alison After Hours. And remember, folks, people helping people. It's powerful stuff.
Thank you for joining Mike and Alison After Hours. Tune in next time for another great business owner sharing valuable industry ideas. Want to be a guest on our show? Contact us at answers@getadvantage.com.